So first we're going to talk about navigating these dangerous conversations, specifically when they come up inside of a group discussion. And the reason we have to do that is because the settings are so different. See, the reality is that when we're in a group meeting, in a group discussion, we have really clear rules of engagement and like a clearly stated goal of what we're trying to accomplish. And that honestly is really helpful. We're aiming in our groups for a safe circle where everyone can be fully known, accepted, and cared for exactly where they are right then, and then encouraged to grow in their own personal spiritual next steps. And so when we set those ground rules that we read at the beginning of every group meeting, we set those to clearly accomplish that goal specifically. And that really works in our favor in this way. Now that goal that we're trying to accomplish doesn't include everything that we need to live our Christian life and to follow Jesus. But we can't accomplish all the goals that we have in that one context. So we zero in on that one specifically, a safe circle where everyone can be fully known, exactly where they're at, loved and accepted right there, and then encouraged to take their own next spiritual step in looking more like Jesus. And so when we drift into a hot topic with lots of division, something that comes up as divisive, and sort of off of what we're normally talking about, when we drift to ideas about issues instead of like our actual experiences and things that that are going on in our own lives, we usually end up sacrificing that safety that we're aiming for because everyone comes in so loaded and ready for a fight on these topics. I like to think of it as people walking in with either like when confronted with a dangerous conversation, they throw up the wall that they're used to building, or they pull out the gun that they're ready to fire. It's a fight or flight situation, and it just happens relationally and conversationally. And so what we want to do is keep people's walls down and guns away. Just in general, always good to not bring a gun to group. But that's why it's more important than ever to read the ground rules before every discussion. The ground rules help us build a really important muscle of listening and seeking to understand, like hearing the whole story and not just the soundbite. There's a lot of potential for maybe if you heard just the soundbite or the attitude or the action or the thing that happened from somebody and nothing else, so no context, you would be like, I would never engage with you. I would never be your friend. That's where we would never get along. But when you hear the whole story, it's a totally different situation because you start to understand exactly how they got there, where it came from, and you totally view the person differently than you would view their soundbite. And so setting that kind of groundwork, actually flexing that muscle week after week, is unbelievably important. It's a proactive way to guard against people's walls or guns, their fight or flight. And it's a really helpful way not just to create that and preserve that in our groups, but for us to build that muscle for other conversations and relationships in our lives as well. The group statement, those ground rules also help us be reactive when somebody does break the rules, when somebody drifts off into dangerous territory. When we have set the group discussion on the basis of those ground rules, it's much easier to call it out, call back to the rules, say something simple like, hey, I think we're drifting into territory that we don't want to be in right now. Or, you know what, that feels like we're, looking to politics for our wisdom and guidance. And remember, in this discussion, we're trying to look to the Bible alone for wisdom and guidance. Or, you know what, it feels like you are, over advising. I don't think they asked for advice. Maybe if they need advice specifically on that situation, they could ask the group for it at another time. It's easier to call it out because you've already agreed to the ground rules beforehand, and then it doesn't feel like a personal attack. And the other thing that doing that, calling it out or calling back to the ground rules does is it buys you time as a group facilitator or a leader, because we can't treat our groups like social media, for example. When someone veers into the realm of race or politics and especially throws out an opinion or a soundbite, it is really easy, with no context, again, and no experience, it's really easy to attack the opinion, because opinions can be attacked. We don't care about attacking opinions. They're good or they're bad based on what we think. But it doesn't feel like a person when it's an opinion that we're attacking. And so we throw up those walls, we heighten the tension, the conversation gets totally sidetracked. And that's what we never want to happen in our group. And so buying ourselves time means that we can de-escalate tension, We can punt the conversation down the road. If it's something we really need to get into and say, hey, we need to talk about how the pandemic is like actually affecting our lives, how racial tension is actually affecting our lives, how this upcoming political nightmare of an election is actually affecting our lives. If we need to do that, we can, but it's always helpful to punt it down the road a week or so we can prepare, be ready, and even have some conversations personally. And that is the key, the follow-up personally. This whole season of tension and division, I think, is a golden chance to build bridges with people, to start to understand people better by having important and meaningful conversations, to listen really well and build relationships so that we have a solid foundation. We have a ton of relational chips in the bank when we want to move toward possibly sharpening people, challenging each other, helping each other shape a more biblical worldview, and instead of challenging our views against the other side, starting to challenge our views against Scripture. That is a hard and long battle that we get to face with each other and for each other, but it only happens when we buy ourselves time and set up that goal over there on the relationship of the safety and acceptance and grace that we give each other in the moment. And when we buy ourselves time, it really helps us see if it's a conversation we need to have as a group or if it's something that we need to do on a more individual basis.